Hi, everyone. Welcome to The Story That Built Her. This is a show where we go beyond the highlight reel and we get to the real, honest stories of amazing women. I'm your host, Monique Alvarez, and we are going to talk about not just wins, but wounds, wisdom, and the wild ride that life takes us on. Because behind every amazing brand, business, and woman, there's a story, and we're here to talk about it. So I'm super excited to have Brooke with us today. Hi, Brooke. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing wonderful. I'm excited to be here today and have this wonderful conversation.
Yes. So, Brooke, I know that you have a powerful story to tell. In fact, you recently came out with your book and launched that worldwide. How did that feel to not just share your story on social media or in video or on podcasts, but to write your book and put it out there?
It felt liberating, truly. I didn't really realize that I needed to have that experience because I had been so afraid to tell my story and didn't realize that honestly, the best healing part of it was actually letting it just be free. And instead of holding on to this, it really wasn't meant for me. It was bigger than me. I felt like, even in releasing this book, it's liberated other women and they've reached out to me and they've said, oh my gosh, everything in your story just really resonated with me and it helped me. And I need to realize that I want to heal and I want a bigger vision for my life. So that was the purpose of it, was to move women to want something more for themselves because they deserve it.
I love how you said that. So liberating, and not even realizing that last piece of sort of letting it free in the world was such an important component. Mm-hmm. So you just said it right there. And so this is where I want to start. What felt most scary about sharing your story?
What people were going to think, especially people that I know. So I'm talking about family, old friends that, I lost when I left the community that I was a part of. And just saying, okay, what are they going to think if they read this book? And how am I going to be perceived, or how am I going to be judged? And I think that was the biggest piece. But I also kind of worried about, well, how are people going to perceive me once they do read this part? My journey is very unique. I know that my path is different than most. And so telling this story, I knew was also going to be leaving me in a very vulnerable place to be like, okay, what are people going to say? And, am I going to get good feedback, or am I going to get feedback that is going to be hurtful, or, something I'm going to have to work through? And honestly, so far, I haven't had any of those experiences. All I've had is really positive, beautiful experiences, because in telling my story, I realized that this is also, helping people up to see that, maybe there is some dark things about your story. Maybe there's things that you regret, or that you made mistakes, or you feel shame or embarrassment about. I had to own those things. There's things in my story that, yeah, they made me feel embarrassed and shameful. But I also have to say, well, if I don't share this, how do I show people that it's okay to sit with embarrassment and shame? And that this is really just part of the journey, and being radically responsible and accountable for, your experience, because everything that I walked through is going to help someone else in their own journey to not have to suffer as long as I did. So I think ultimately I know that this is a win no matter what.
You said it as directly and honestly as I think it can be said. I was worried about what people would think about me. And the people we know, those are the hardest ones, right? Perfect strangers, that's cool, whatever. But the people we know, people who are in our lives, in our circle, have been in our circle, that's sort of that, you can feel that lump in your throat. And I also like what you said about, the embarrassing, shameful, most difficult parts of our life, our journey, our story. When we keep those tucked away and hidden, it says so much about what we're willing to do with our own shame and embarrassment, right? It's my husband really taught me this. It was just like, you know what? If you can bring everything to the light, everything can be a gift. Everything can be helpful, useful. And that's what you were willing to do. So where shall we start, Brooke? I know that you've had an epic journey, and I just want to say out the gate, Um, leaving a community, leaving a religion is just as difficult, I believe, as leaving your family, leaving your tribe. And I watch Survivor. I'm like a student of Survivor. And at this one tribal council, a young girl, she said, tribal council is so difficult because no one, it's like an innate hardwired thing in a human being. No one wants to get pushed to the outside of the camp. It's terrifying because out there is where you will certainly die. Mm-hmm. So how did you do that? Knowing that I have no doubt that you could feel what was at stake. What helped you make the decisions that you did in leaving your community and religion?
I think that, there was something, obviously I wanted to stay. Like I tried to make up every reason or possible idea of, okay, well, maybe if I just stayed here and I faked it, and so I could keep my friends, so I could keep my world comfortable, I could keep my family, my parents, all of these things. I did think about that, to be real, because it is scary to be thrown out of your tribe and your community. You don't know what to expect. And I was taught from a very young age that anything outside of the society or the community is evil, wrong, bad, going to be destroyed in the future. So here I am throwing myself basically into this space and not really knowing. I'm in the unknown. So I was fearful. All those things came up, second guessing myself in this decision. But the one thing that I couldn't put down was that I couldn't stomach like pretending. There was just something inside of me that said, I can't pretend that I actually believe this anymore. I can't pretend to actually love this anymore. It just on every level didn't resonate with me anymore. And I didn't feel like my truth. So I had to just be really honest with myself and say, I'm going to have to just let this stuff go. I don't really know what's going to happen when I do this, but I'm going to have to walk away. And I did that at the same time when I did that with my relationship too. It was like, I don't really know where I'm going or what's going to happen, but I know that it's time to walk away. I know this is not good for me anymore. It's not healthy for me anymore. And I felt the same way about the religion. So I just fell into this space of unknown. That's the only thing I can say it as, and just realized that everything that came with it, yes, there was going to be consequences. Yes, I was going down a completely different path, but I was willing to step into that to honor the fact that nothing resonated anymore. And I wanted to somehow be true to myself, even though I had never done that my whole entire life. So it was like this huge, it was an awakening to say, okay, well, I'm going to honor how I feel right now. That's what I did for myself.
Wow. You just hit me between the eyes with that, even though I had never done that before. Mm-hmm. Wow. So, because this is the thing, I think, as human beings, we forget that even though we've never done something before, that doesn't mean we can't do it now. Because if the past is constantly informing the future, how do we get out of these cycles and loops? And so this time was presented to you, and even though you had not done it before, you decided, I have to. So what were some of those consequences that you experienced?
Well, once I made that decision, and I basically I kind of slowly faded out. I wasn't like some people will like announce that they're leaving the religion. I just slowly faded away because I wanted to kind of have some semblance of maybe having my parents in my life. That was never going to happen. I didn't realize that then, but eventually we were going to part ways no matter what. But I realized that as I completely started to fade away, they just started like kind of dropping like flies, right? The people that I thought were my friends, man, they were gone in an instant. These were the people that were more like, I would call them elitists in the religion. They were like, they were elders' wives, and they were pioneers in this space. So they were more what they like to call is more spiritual. And so the minute that you're not conforming they really drop you very quickly. And that happened. So I started to witness that. I was like, wow, these people really never were my friends. So you're starting to have all these realizations. And then the people that I was most intimate with held on the longest, these friendships, but eventually they had to just be given away as well. They had to give up. They had to either choose their faith or me. And their faith was going to win out because the religion tells them so. And it was the same thing with my parents. So I've been estranged from them for the past about 4.5 years. I haven't seen them for about that period of time as well. So it's been it's been a difficult process grieving, people that are still alive, especially family members. I have a grandmother and an aunt and, lots of family that are still in the religion. So grieving those people and realizing, what, they can't see me for the woman that I am. And, it's always funny because they're like, you've changed. I'm like, no, I'm still the same woman. I'm still the kind, loving, giving woman with the same sense of humor. Nothing's changed about me, just what I believe. And they can't see that. And so I just realized the people that can't see me, I don't need those people in my life, whether they're family or not. Emotionally, it was too much for me. So I knew that was going to be the consequence. And that's what happened, and that grieving cycle I had to process those. And some days I do still feel that grief. I want to talk about that because, sometimes that doesn't go away. It's always going to kind of be in the background. I mean, we weren't meant to lose community. We weren't meant to be abandoned by family.
Absolutely. And I think it's a different kind of grieving when somebody is still alive, but they choose not to be part of your life. And when these things are so, you can't be in if you're not this way, or if you are not this religion or a member of this thing. And I think, I know you have children and, I've got 2 boys. And so for me, automatically what I think of is, dang, to reject my children because they don't believe the same way I do. It's no joke. It's quite a step. And I think that this is why a lot of people will stay in things that they know inside are not right for them, that they actually can't pretend. And I think you said it perfectly. That is how it felt when I left the church, is I couldn't pretend that anymore. I just, once you know something, once you can see something, you can't see it any differently. So when you talked about you're still the same person, I'd love for you to talk about this, because this is something I've noticed when people leave a church. I actually had a friend who recently left a very big, well-known religion, and everyone kept telling her, you're going to have no moral compass. You're going to, you're going to go to hell in a handbasket. Like suddenly, because she wasn't in the church, that she would not have the capability of being a good person. That is not my observation. People are who they are, and they're going to make their choices. What does that look like for you in terms of, you were raised a certain way and then who you choose to be now? And, sort of that idea that people can have when somebody is not inside of a religion.
Yeah. I love that you brought that up, because my moral compass, I believe, has gotten better. Has become more grounded in integrity and loyalty and honesty, more than I ever was in the religion. And some people might be like, wow, that sounds shocking. Like, who were you in the religion? Well, in the religion, I was living a double life, because I didn't necessarily believe with all of its teachings. I didn't agree with them, right? We were taught from a young age, you have to marry in the same religion, right? So I abided by that. I married in the religion when I was young. But you also, you weren't allowed to have sex before marriage. And, you were told what to wear, what to watch, what you could do. You were really confined into this little box. And I, from a young age, hated being in the box. I was the rebel, and I was like, I don't want to be in this box. And so I was always kind of testing my limits and my boundaries and not wanting to kind of abide by all the rules. And I didn't. So I would like to call myself, as I was actually living what a lot of people say is I was a hypocrite, right? Like I was pretending like I was one way, but I really didn't feel like I was meant to be in that box. So I would go outside of that, and it also shows that I think a lot of people do that, right? People go to church, but guess what? If they're not showing love to their family, if they're shunning their family, if they're judgmental, if they're egoic, if they're hateful, if they're racist, right? They're sexist, like what all of these things that are actually happening in religion, but yet you call yourself spiritual just because you go to church, but on the outside, you have a lack of love, then it means nothing. So I actually have been able to embody a different version of myself because living inside of that religion, whether people want to see it or not, they were extremely judgmental of everybody on the outside. So they looked down on everyone else that was outside of that society. And we were taught that from a young age. Everyone else is beneath you. You are above because you are the chosen one. You're the chosen people. And it was, something that I realized as I began to unravel that religious programming that, wow, I didn't realize even how judgmental I had been. And that is not love. That is not acceptance of humanity. And so I like to say, you know what? I am actually a better person having walked away from that religion.
Yeah, I can relate to so much of that. Mm-hmm. Now, I know what you said is, writing your book and the work that you do now, you knew that all this was bigger than you. Obviously, you had to walk it out. You had to go through the growth and the grief and the sort of designing your life and reclaiming yourself. In the work that you do, what do you find is the most powerful thing that happens when women come into your space? What sort of transformations happen? Is it very similar to what you went through?
It is often, I tend to attract the women that were very much like me at the time, kind of coming out of abusive relationships, really unclear of who they are, having a lack of confidence and self-esteem, low self-worth, all of these components, and feeling lost in life. So it's why I do the work that I do, is to help women to go from point A to point B and show them that you can get there quicker, right? This doesn't have to be years of suffering, years of traditional talk therapy, or any of those things. That I want to show you how you can actually transform from the inside out and realize that, wow, you have so much more potential. And so that you can start to really harness that potential and actually believe in yourself again, because abusive environments and abusers take away that ability to believe in yourself. You start to have this voice inside that says, maybe I can't, maybe I never will. And so you stay small because that's what you were taught. You were taught to stay small and not think big visions or become the woman that you were really meant to be in this life. And I want to show women that they can break through all of that conditioning, all of that programming, and they can really hone in on who they really want to be and how they really want to feel in this life.
I think you're so right when you said the voices, these voices that become our own. And that's when it's most dangerous, when it's no longer someone else coming at us, criticizing us or putting us down or keeping us small. It's when that we internalize it and then we do it to ourselves. Oh, yeah.
Over and over and over.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah, because it's a loop, it's on repeat nonstop. And I loved when you said that people can begin to see the life that they want versus maybe just being on autopilot, accepting what's been. Mm-hmm. What is your big vision for your life? What have you been able to see and fall in love with and reach for as you've went through your process?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, I had no idea I was going to create a business. I had no idea that I was going to tap into that, and a very successful business to begin with. You know what I mean? I realized that, I've taken the last 3 years of becoming an entrepreneur and growing my business and being able to hold space for women that really need someone like myself that has walked it, has lived it, has breathed it. That is so helpful in the journey. I realized that very quickly, that I only wanted to work with people that have literally lived through what I've lived through, because they can see me, they can hear me, they can understand me. And then you just heal so much more quickly with that. So that's one component. And then the other vision for myself is obviously to continue to keep writing. I am currently writing, my next book. Actually, my next two books. One's going to be a children's book, and the other book is going to be on how to unravel religious programming. So I'm continuing that. I have bigger vision with how I want to show up in the world, and how I also want to continue to help women heal on a larger scale, because I'm only one person. So my vision is to eventually be able to create a space that women can come and they can learn and they can grow, and it can be from my teachings, my wisdom, but I'm also not the one just facilitating it, because it takes a lot of energy from myself. So that's my big picture coming up here in the next year or so. And then from there, I'm just going to allow myself to continue to grow.
I love that. When we first started working together, of course, I did your assessment. And as soon as I saw you were a Life Path 3, it was just like, oh, yes, of course she's writing. Of course she's meant to speak. You are a living, breathing mouthpiece. And I like what you said, in that this is how it has to be going forward. We have to learn from people who know it because they've lived it, not because they studied it from someone else or they learned it from a book, they watched a YouTube video, but this is your lived experience, because that is the only thing that really translates right now. There's a lot of, deciphering what's real and not real, and what's fluff and what's not. This is real. And this is you in your truest essence, because it's your lived truth, and it's who you are. It's who you're meant to be in this lifetime. And so I am so happy to hear that you're continuing to write, continuing to grow, because it's yours. It's definitely your gift.
Thank you.
Let me ask you this. When you were on the edge, when you were considering and you were contemplating and you were thinking, could I fake it? Could I pretend? Could I lead a double life? When you were going through all these possibilities, and then you're in that decision mode. For all the people who are in that same spot, what would you say to them as they're contemplating their move and the consequences?
I would tell them first to get support. I didn't do that for myself. I did the classic trauma response, which is to think that I could do it all on my own and be super independent and think I'm this strong woman and I've got this. And, kind of thinking, because that really comes from a childhood where you kind of had to do everything on your own, where you think you can figure it all out on your own. And it is completely a trauma response. So I always tell people, go and get support, because the cognitive dissonance that comes up with leading a community like that, or a religious belief system, or a relationship that has also played with your mind, it is this very confusing state. Your brain cannot make sense of two conflicting beliefs. It cannot hold it. And so you really need someone to kind of, cut through the weeds and kind of open up space for you, help you see more clearly. I can't say that or really drill that in anymore, because it really is something that you need to have for yourself. I would have suffered a lot less if I would have had support, because I would have been like, oh, that's why I feel like this. Oh my gosh, no wonder, right? I had no idea what I was really experiencing. I didn't know I was experiencing the trauma bond, leaving the relationship, all of the chemical effects that have with coming off of that relationship. And then also realizing that I had this very trauma bond space with God, and how much that had affected me, how much fear was living in my body, and all of these components. So that's why I tell people, get the support from someone that has done it or understands it. Maybe even someone that's, been in your community and has left it before, this religion. And so they can help guide you on this journey. They can hold your hand. You need someone to hold your hand. We were never meant to heal on our own. We were meant to heal in community.
As you're saying that, I think of Lord of the Rings, and Frodo had to go on this epic journey, and there was no avoiding that. He had to walk it out. But without Sam by his side, how much harder would that have been? And I there's a scene when he's in this battle of if is Sam for him or not, because that nasty little, uh, creature had convinced him, you can't trust Sam. And that's the sort of mental craziness that goes on when you're doing what you're talking about, right? Because it's hard to get your bearings.
That is like the perfect analogy. Thank you for saying that. I'm gonna have to use that because that's so perfect. I love Lord of the Rings too, but I'm like, that is so true because there is this lack of connection to your intuition that's been shut down from the get-go, right? Whether you've been in an abusive environment or religion or a, relationship, whatever that is, it cuts you off from that inner knowing, that inner compass that's already within you that's been saying and screaming, oh my gosh, get the hell out of here. And that voice, like you said, that crazy voice that says, oh, you're wrong. That says, you can't trust that person, or nope, you're doing the wrong thing, right? Is just this voice that you need to learn to quiet and trust your inner instinct again. But you also need that person. You need that Sam to say, oh, I can trust. And then he's going to hold my hand through this process. And so that you can quiet that voice and really connect more with yourself.
So having went through the relationship, leaving religion, having this, estrangement from family, how did you begin to trust people again? How did you begin to entertain the possibility that there were people who could accept you as you are, who are for you? Talk a little bit about that process.
Yeah. I'm going to be honest. This was very, very, very difficult for me. I still struggle with this to this day. There's so much complex PTSD that comes from living in these type of environments and abusive environments, and also that religious programming that's fear-based.
Yeah.
So you're actually taught from a young age that you cannot trust anyone outside of society. So then being kind of thrown out and going into the world and saying, okay, well, who can I trust? I didn't feel like I could trust anybody. So I kind of felt like I was always like looking over my shoulder, waiting, who can I trust? I can't trust anyone, right? So, and that just leaves you in this state of hypervigilance constantly.
Yeah.
Right? And your nervous system is on alert constantly. And I was in this chronic state of stress all the time because I didn't know who I could trust. I was fearful. And as I went on my journey, I began to meet people that I resonated with. I started to make new friendships, new connections, and people that I could trust. I realized the universe was really sending me people that could help me on this journey. It was teachers, it was mentors, it was people, friendships, that felt like soulmates. And then I met a man that really showed me what loyalty and trust and real love felt like. And I talk about him in my book because I had never experienced that. I had such a struggle with trusting men after that experience. Then it was like I couldn't trust any man. I was like, never again will I trust a man. The men that I was supposed to trust, my father and him, I couldn't. And so then it felt like I couldn't allow myself to trust ever again. But this man showed me time and time again that he was safe enough to trust. And I finally realized what that felt like in my body. I started to realize what trust feels like and connect with that. And that helped me begin to kind of unravel this fear of not being able to trust people. So I will say that's a journey in itself. You've been betrayed. You're going to have some deep wounds and some things that you're going to have to work through to be able to fully let go, because otherwise you're going to have this guarded heart, and you're never going to let anybody in again. And that's where I saw myself, and I didn't want to be that person. I wanted to change. And that ability for me to witness that and say, I don't want this, I don't want to be this person, kept me searching, kept me seeking the things that were going to help me from this, because I wanted to heal this part of me.
I think that's so beautiful, Brooke, when you knew, I don't want to go through life as a walled city. I don't want to have, because that's the thing. The things that we think are protecting us, they're also keeping us from. Yeah. So it's a two-way, it's a double-edged sword, no matter which way you slice it. What would you say to people that are going through this, when they are figuring out how to trust, when they're figuring out how to heal? You kept searching and exploring. Are there any tools or resources that really helped you that you would recommend for others to at least go explore?
Yeah. So there's a few. One is the therapy that I do, which is rapid transformational therapy. This helps me. I got really stuck in traditional talk therapy. So I found RTT work, and it's working with the subconscious through hypnotherapy. Obviously with someone that's trained in it, like myself or someone else, and helping me access and process those traumas of betrayal, of times where I didn't feel safe, where I couldn't trust, really helped me to start to not only feel the emotion that I couldn't feel then and process it, but also to begin to rewire my brain. So for what I wanted to believe and who I wanted to be going forward, because I didn't want to be the woman that was hardened and cynical. And, I didn't want to be that version of myself. And so I said, okay, I want something else. And that's what I decided to engage in. So that work was really profound for me. And that's why I decided to go to school and do that work, because of how much it helped me change. And then as I moved down in my journey, the next two things that I will recommend is psychedelics. Psychedelic assisted therapy was extremely helpful and profound. Some people say, oh my gosh, that sounds so scary. I know some people have never heard of this, or some people are afraid of these type of things, but I can't say enough of how much it helps break down those walls and help you find your true inner self again, because of all the masks you've worn for so many years, because of the person that you had to be, the people pleaser, the person that you had to show up as just to be accepted and loved. It breaks all of that away, and it removes it because it doesn't serve you, and it lets you find your true self. It's empowering, it's liberating, and it's helped me restore a sense of peace within myself that I don't think would have been accessible otherwise. And then the third thing I'm going to recommend is anything about somatic experiencing or working with the body. Mm-hmm. So the body does keep the score. If anybody's ever read that book or knows about that book, it's there. If you had a blow to the face, guess what? Your body remembers, and it's still holding that trauma. And you're still going to need to process it through the body, not just the brain, because the body's still waiting for the next blow. Mm. It's working with that nervous system, because it's actually a foundational piece of becoming a more embodied individual, a more grounded and present individual. So you're not living in the past, you're not living in the future. So there's no depression, there's no anxiety. You're just able to kind of be here in the moment right now. And that's powerful work. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. This is all very deep, hard work. This is not for the faint of heart. This is not for the people that want the quick fix, because there is no quick fix. You can use it at surface level.
No, it's so true. This is not the bubble bath route. This is the real work. And I want to touch on what you said, because psychedelics are incredibly powerful. And I often share that, because of how I was raised, I was extremely judgmental about everything, drugs, alcohol, caffeine, like everything, pork, all the things. And I actually had a dream, and a mushroom spoke to me and said, go look this up. And it was like, oh, this is not, I had been out of the church for how long, 20 years, but it's still it's the way of thinking. And I just thought, psychedelics? Are you kidding me? Like, I would never do that. That's a drug. This is for, this is for somebody else other than myself, somebody who's at a party or a rave or God knows what, a concert. And I was so resistant to it. And I watched, what's that documentary on Netflix? I'm going blank now. It's like
How to Change Your Mind, or Fantastic Fungi.
Yes. Fantastic Fungi. Yes. And when I watched that, everything blew open. Yeah. And I think that this is the beauty of where we are right now, is these are gifts for us. as individuals and as a society. And I will agree with you. The experience I had with them was profound because it shifts your perspective and it allows you to work through things that I think I'm not sure. I'm not sure there's many with the things that you mentioned. I'm not sure that there's a way that you can get that type of healing and work through at that deep of a level any other way. You know, going to talk therapy is not going to work. Numbing yourself on prescription drugs isn't going to work. You know, this is actually going to the root cause and to the source. And I think what you said is true. This is what I personally experienced is psychedelics helped me get rid of the persona. Mm-hmm. Because all of us there's things in life where we take on that mask and we take on that thing. And then after we carry them for so long and we keep layering it on, the true us beneath that is almost lost. It's who am I really? The truest identity. So I appreciate you talking about that because I think that's the biggest thing with psychedelics is getting over the stereotypes and the preconceived notions and sort of the negative point of view that could be there when it's absolutely so helpful.
Completely. Yeah. I think there's a lot of fear there still. People don't really know that people fear the unknown. You know, I love that you had it come into you in a vision. It really came to me very intuitively as well. And it was like, you need to go and look into this. This is going to help you heal. And so I did. I just followed the nudge. And I was so happy that I did because it profoundly helped me work through something that would have taken me years and years to work through. And it was very helpful. And it helped me access a part of myself, which was my inner child, that I didn't even know that I hadn't connected to before. So it was really a very beautiful journey. And since then, I've been working with the plant medicines since then to, you know, help in microdosing. And, you know, it really helps with opening up your creativity. It's not about just healing. It's also about creativity and tapping into this beautiful space that you don't even realize that you can tap into because we're all so busy. We don't have enough time to sit still. But these type of medicines help you tap into that and really help you create the vision that you want for your life.
Absolutely. I found the same thing, Brooke, with the microdosing. And I'm seeing lots of top CEOs who are doing this. They microdose and they say it helps them. Two things. I found this to be very interesting. It helps them in the creativity. Mm-hmm. And a lot of them describe the second component. The best way to describe it is they can see what's coming. They can almost see the trends. They can see where things are going. And if you're in business, that's incredibly valuable, you know, because things are constantly shifting. And I think it is because it allows us to access more than we are accessing. And like you said, it's easy to get caught sort of in this. People are just going through life. They're on autopilot. You know, they're busy. I'm going through my checklist. And so our awareness can expand with these things. And now I can become aware of so much more because there is so much more, of course.
Yes, there is so much more. You know, we have to believe in the unseen. And that's really been a big part of my journey is that belief in the unseen and reconnecting with, you know, what I believe is, you know, the universe and that connection to a greater power, but also realizing that, you know, we all have these gifts. However we choose to use them is up to us. But psychedelics can really help you experience that and connect with that part of you that maybe hasn't been open to your gifts and really being able to see a bigger picture of what your life could actually be and feel like. You know, we get really stuck in the space of just thinking we got to do the grind, the 9 to 5, and, you know, and that doesn't feel very fulfilling for most people. Most people are not fulfilled by that. And we're burnt out. We're exhausted. And this is a calling to a higher consciousness to see what you can actually bring in for yourself.
So beautiful. Brooke, where can people get your book and follow you?
They can grab my book on Amazon. I have the Kindle and also the paperback. I actually have it right here. Just show the beautiful picture, of course. I love my butterfly. And then they can find me on lifecoachinggoddess.com. That's my website, and anywhere on social media. I'm on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, all of the spots. They can connect with me there.
Beautiful. Brooke, I appreciate you taking the time to share your story here. Thank you for releasing your book to the world and being so incredibly brave through this whole journey.
Thank you so much for having me on and having this important conversation.
I want to remind everyone that telling your story, it doesn't just help you and liberate you. It can liberate so many others. If you would like to share your story in one of our upcoming books, be sure and check out the link below. Until next time, bye.